color, and I practice natural medicine, and doing this about 20 years. Most of you guys know me quite well. Tonight I want to talk about thyroid dysfunction, and one of the reasons is it's one of the biggest problems we have in the country. And a lot of people who don't feel well are on thyroid medication. We're going to talk about that tonight too. But it's a very complex issue that doesn't involve just the thyroid. In allopathic medicine, we divide everything up into little groups. But you're going to see tonight that thyroid issues are extremely complex, very difficult, and I think you're going to be kind of surprised at what we come up with. First of all, let's just go through some symptoms. And the first one we're going to go by, which is probably the worst to the least. Fatigue is the number one thing that we hear. And then the increase in weight without an increase in calories. And I have to confess that most of you guys that come in and say, I swear I'm not eating more. I don't necessarily believe you, but I know sometimes that's the truth. And that is a symptom. And it's something you notice. Also different weight gain around different parts of the body that's not normal. Depression and constipation is very common. And of course you can have all these symptoms too, not without having a thyroid problem, but these are things that you look at. Hypersensitivity to cold weather, poor circulation and numbness in your hands and feet, muscle cramps while at rest, catch colds and viral infections real easily, wounds heal slow, sleep goes way up, chronic digestive problems, hypochlorhydria, which is lack of hydrochloric acid in your stomach, itchy dry skin. But the big things is we see a lot too when we know there's a thyroid issue is your hair changes texture, your skin changes texture. It gets brittle, your skin changes texture, your hair starts falling out. So if your hair just out of the middle of nowhere starts clumping or starts falling out, that's a problem too. And then if you get when you really get into the last stages of hypothyroidism, which is too low, you get myxedema, you get stuff around your face and all that. But what I want to show next is what the thyroid, first of all, the thyroid's a little gland, sits right here in the throat, and it controls the chemical processes in your body. Everything in your body is controlled by the speed of it is controlled by the thyroid. So that's why if it's going too slow, you gain weight. If it's going too fast, you lose weight. And if you ever see anyone who has had hyperthyroid, which is too fast, their eyeballs bulge out, their eyes bulge out, and their eyelids go way up like this, and they feel like they're coming out of their skin. Literally feel like they're coming out of their skin. The opposite on hypo or low thyroid, people feel real sluggish. But there's the thyroid manufactures this stuff, but it gets kind of complicated. Let me show you everything that's involved. Let me try to see if we can see that. This is a brain. And you got a little gland called the pituitary gland. And the brain looks at the bloodstream and sees what the levels of the thyroid are, thyroid hormone, and it tells the pituitary, I'm going to draw pictures. It sends a message down here, and it has a hormone called TSH. Up here, there's another hormone that is really not important at this time. So here at the thyroid, this is where it gets interesting. The thyroid gland, most endocrine glands, they just release that endocrine right into the bloodstream, straight from the gland. But here it makes what we call T4 and a tiny, tiny bit of T3. And I'm going to go through how this is made and how it's put together here in just a second. But T3 is the active, and T4 is inactive. So when it's made and put in the thyroid gland, it's not active. It's just sitting in there and being stored. Then you have the TSH comes in and says we need more thyroid, and this thing releases it, and it doesn't just go straight in the bloodstream. It goes over to the liver. So T4, which is inactive, is sent over to the liver. And then the liver converts T4 to T3, which is the active form. You cannot use T4 in your body. You have to have T3. So it comes out and it's bound up, and I'm going to show you how that works in just a second. It goes to the liver, The liver does three things with it. First of all, it makes straight T3, like that. And it makes about 60% of the available T3 as a liver. Then it makes another product called reverse T3, and it's totally inactive. And we just use that as a marker for liver issues and also adrenal issues when we're looking at this. Not many doctors run this. And the next thing the liver does is it sends, it changes into TSA and a T3AC, and it goes to, anybody want to guess where it goes to next? T3, this stuff? It goes to the intestinal tract. Okay? And so this is then sent down here, still inactive, and this intestinal tract releases T3 about 20%. So this is 60 to 70%. So, when this stuff, before you can have any thyroid to use, it's got to go from the thyroid gland to the liver, to the intestinal tract, and then it turns into T3 before it can be used. So just looking at this diagram right here, you can see which organs, what organ is the most important organ in thyroid function that you can think of besides the thyroid? The liver. And the next would be the gut. And that's even more important. We'll get to that after a while. So this is the basic flow of how this works. And remember, T3 is what we're looking for right here. And you're going to see here in a minute when we put the rest of it together, why when you get synthetic hormone, sometimes you still don't feel any better. You get worse. Or you don't, and so we're going to go through that. So what I want to do now is show you how this works right here, build on this a little bit more, and then we're going to put it all together. So, the brain tells the thyroid, and we're going to draw a picture of our thyroid like this. And this is where I talked about earlier, all the T's get kind of confusing. Don't worry about it, you're not going to have a test. And these things have little machines in here that will build this stuff. So the TSH comes out, tells the thyroid, and the thyroid takes iodine and tyrosine. Anybody know what tyrosine is?
Amino acid. Yeah.
It's amino acid. You eat it. That's why we don't say you should be a vegetarian, even in natural medicine. It's a very important amino acid. It takes those two, and in a process, in these little follicles right here, it's an enzyme called, and we abbreviate it TPO. It puts these two together with a whole bunch of other stuff, and it manufactures T4. Remember our T4? Now, is T4 inactive or is T4 active?
Inactive.
It's inactive. So, what it does then is it goes from here into this thing right here, and it attaches it to what we call a TBG. And I call this my truck molecule. So, this TBG is really like a little pickup truck here, and it sticks T4 in here. Okay? Now the good thing about this little truck, and this truck is sitting in here like this, and it's ready to use, it's ready to be put out into the bloodstream. It's in a storage capacity here. It's inactive. Okay? So, that's how this is made. So, we have two enzymes here that are very important. And when we run your test, and you're going to see on the farm, we'll run a TPO enzyme, and we'll run an antibody test, and we'll run a TBG antibody test. And you're thinking, why do we do that? Because in allopathic medicine and regular standard medicine, we're not going to do that. We're just going to run a TSH, and we're going to run a T4, free T4, and see how much production you have. But you're going to see here in a minute where these enzymes are really, really, really important. So, if you're missing, let's since I said that statement, let's look at this. If you're missing this enzyme here, or this enzyme's not working right, what's going to happen? You won't make T4, right? Because if you put iodine and tyrosine together with TPO, you come out with T4. So if even though you're getting a good TSH and the body's telling the thyroid to make it, we get plenty of iodine and tyrosine in our diets, if something is damaging the TPO, I'm going to show how that happens here in a little bit, you're not going to make the T4 and have it here. Okay? So T4 will not be made. If the TPO is fine and T4 is made, but something is damaging the TBG, like maybe one of the tires are flat here, it's not going to bind and you won't have it stored in here. Okay, so it'll just stay there. So it's not going to be set and ready to go. Everybody understand that? Is that too complicated? Let me do it one more time like this. Now, functional medicine is a lot more difficult than just handing out medication, because a lot of times our patients, they're taking medication okay already. How come the medication doesn't work? Okay, so if your TPO plus your amino acid plus iodine makes T4. Okay? Then the T4 plus your little truck makes it ready for storage. Remember, it's still inactive, but now it can be used. It can be put out in the bloodstream. You can't just throw it out in the bloodstream, because if you throw all this into the bloodstream, it's got to be carried down to the liver, remember? So it's got a truck that's got to carry it down to the liver. When it gets in the liver, then it's going to take it out of the pickup truck. And where else does it go?
The gut.
Well, not directly, but it goes there eventually. Just checking you guys out. Okay, so y'all got this now? So this is in the thyroid gland itself. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so we have two spots of problems already. The TPG and the TPO, and we run those antibodies. And if those antibodies are high, then we got a problem. A real problem, because you're not going to either be able to manufacture the thyroid hormone in the thyroid, or you're not going to be able to get it properly ready for storage. Okay. All right, let's talk about antibodies real quick, because that's the next thing I want to talk about. If y'all understand how this is made, then I want to talk about antibodies. If you guys are familiar with vaccinations. So they give you a shot. They give you an antigen. And when they give you an antigen, your body recognizes that antigen as an enemy. So it tags it and marks it, and it builds a specific little soldier that will mark that thing if it ever sees it again. And it marks it for destruction. So if you get an antigen in your body, like this, your body looks at it and says, this is not me. It's going to tag it with an antibody. And I always just use these little things as an antibody. This is called an antigen-antibody complex. And these little things here, we call these titers. And that's what you do. Is say if you take a tetanus shot when you're little and you don't get tetanus, then 10 years later they want you to get a booster, right? Because the number of these little antibodies have dropped down, you're not protected anymore. So you want to keep these titers up. Your body does this for lots of things. Little kids that catch colds and flus, they get an antibody built up to a certain bug, and they won't get that bug again. And this happens very fast. And this complex here can do a multiple of things. It can stick on different parts and surfaces, cause damage all over the place. It can be eaten by a white blood cell right off the bat, which is what we want to do in the case of viruses, where this guy will just eat this whole thing. But this thing can also go and stick on different, what we call receptor sites. Let's go back to our thyroid. Gland. Okay, remember our thyroid gland? We have receptor sites here where the TSH comes down on here. TSH from the brain. Remember in my picture in the beginning, the TSH from the brain comes down, tells the thyroid to make stuff. If one of these antibodies comes and sticks on here, like this, instead of the TSH, it's going to do one of two things. It's either going to make this thyroid shut down because it's all covered up and it doesn't need, it's saying, telling it don't make any more because it can't receive any TSH, or it's going to make the thyroid go crazy and produce more and more and more and more and more and more. So you end up with what we call Graves' disease if it's too much, hyperthyroid, or the other side you could have hypothyroidism. And your thyroid is working perfect. Okay. I know that's a little difficult. So your thyroid's sitting there, it has to have a messenger here, just like a door. Somebody has to knock on that door and say, hey, y'all start the meeting. The TSH comes down and sticks on here and says, you guys start making thyroid. But if these are all covered up, it never gets the message. Your thyroid is fine, but you're not working. Those are antibodies. And I'm going to show you where antibodies come from. And these antibody complexes are very, very important if you're going to figure out what's wrong. Okay. So where do antibodies come from in a normal situation? Okay, so we talked about the different things that are involved in the thyroid. The thyroid itself, the brain, the pituitary, liver, critically important. I'm not going to get into the liver big time because I have a tape on liver. Some of you saw it last time on how the liver, phase 1, phase 2. If you haven't seen it, just call the office. Molly will send you a tape, it's free. And that's very complex, but this is very important because the liver not only converts the thyroid, it also breaks it down. Hormones that tell your body to do something, they have to be turned off as well as turned on. If you get too much hormones, say estrogen, and it never turns it off the cells, you can get breast cancer. So these hormones have to be destroyed also. The liver is very important, but where do the antibodies come from? Where would you get these antibodies? Because your body should not turn against itself. Well, guess what? The good old gut. Here's what your gut, this is what your stomach looks like. Not your stomach, but your small intestines. This is what it looks like. And I have a stomach tape you can also watch in detail. I have pictures, microscopic pictures and everything. But this is what it looks like. It's like your fingers here. It's supposed to be like this when it's healthy. And so if you eat a piece of chicken and the chicken goes in there and it sits on top of here like this, this cell breaks it down and it brings it down into its components, say like X, Y, and Z. So these antibodies are sitting down here waiting, and they're reading this thing and they're saying, is there anything here that's dangerous? Anything that shouldn't be here? And when it's broken down properly, it reads this and says no problem, so it just sits there. It doesn't do anything. This goes on and does what it's going to do in the body, repair things and all that kind of stuff. But when you get an inflammatory condition in your intestinal tract, and we call this dysbiosis, and again I have a tape on that too, what happens here is these deals here open up like this. So what happens then, well, I tell you, this board is not cooperating tonight. These things open up like this. And that chicken comes right here. It goes straight through into the bloodstream. Then the body gets pretty excited. You're not supposed to have a whole piece of chicken floating around in there. Or wheat, or metals, or bacteria, or viruses, or funguses, or anything else that might be in your intestinal tract. It doesn't belong inside of your body. So this antibody is sitting here waiting, and it sees a piece of chicken or one of these other substances, and what does it do? It goes and it latches onto it and it identifies and it marks this thing to say this does not belong here. We mark it for destruction. Sometimes it doesn't destroy it. Sometimes it goes up and does what? Sticks on our receptor sites in our thyroid. Remember I just drew that a few minutes ago? If that occurs, then you have the problems. So these antibody tests become very, very important. The gut becomes very important. Not only does it take these inactive T3 forms made in the liver and convert it to active T3, it's your thing that really causes the problems. And these little tiny holes in here, these microscopic holes, are what causes it. So, one of the first things we do in thyroid problems, particularly someone who's taken thyroid medication and they're still not doing well, we need to look here and see, do they have antibodies destroying this thing? Okay? And that's not all. You have enzyme processes in the liver, you have enzyme processes all over the place that can also be hurt that need to look at. So this is a big, big deal. So when you come into the clinic, and the first thing I do is run a test on your gut and food allergy test and things like that after we see an enzyme or an antibody test positive, you may be thinking to yourself, why in the world would we do that? And then what are we going to do? What else are we going to do? We're going to run a liver test to see if the liver is working right. So these are very, very important. Okay. Everybody understand that concept?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay.
You have 8 minutes.
Have 8 minutes? Okay. I guess I'm never going to be a movie star here. I never can get on time, or I can't get my boards right. But this is kind of complicated, and I realize that, and I'm going to kind of give you this again. That's basically all the parts and pieces. Let's go through it again as simply as I possibly can, and I'm going to talk about treatment, okay, and see what we can do. Okay. So, just as a review, the brain tells the thyroid to make hormone, which is T4. Then T4 goes to the liver, and it makes T3, which is your active, and it also goes to the intestines. T3 active. This is 70%. This is 20%. So you have 90% of your thyroid hormone that you have to function as a human being that has to be produced in the liver and the intestinal tract. So the thyroid is almost secondary in this whole thing. Okay? And then that's really the whole thing right there. Then, of course, the liver breaks it down on the backside. So this all goes into the bloodstream. Okay? All right. Okay, so what do we do here? I would say that most of the patients that I see have either been treated for thyroid issues, have either been treated for thyroid in the past, or they've been to their other doctors, and they said, I don't feel good, my hair's falling out, all the symptoms we talked about earlier. And they run a T4, a free T4, to see how much T4 is being produced, and they run a TSH. The TSH, remember, you're going to have a lot of TSH messages sent from the brain to make the thyroid. So on the thyroid, if you have low production of thyroid, the TSH is going to go up. So if you have an increase here and an increase there and a decrease of T4, they give you a thyroid medication. Almost none of them, just the general folks out there, ever do antibody testing to find out whether you're producing the thyroid, whether you're destroying the thyroid. hardly anyone knows how to run liver exams and tests to see if your liver's functioning right. And in allopathic medicine, we have no treatment for the liver. Only in functional medicine and natural medicine do we have any treatment for the liver. We do that with blood work. Now, if it doesn't work, and then the other thing that I wanted to show you is, let's say they do give you a RX. Well, they're going to give you T4. Synthroid, Levoxyl is just T4. If you're given T4 and that's it, and your liver's not functioning well, it's not going to work. It's not going to work very well. And what if you have a gut problem? It's not going to work. It still has to be converted. Even though your thyroid's not making it, you put it in there, you put the T4 in here, it's still got to go to the liver, still got to get processed, still got to go to the intestinal tract, still got to get processed. And it's also got to make sure there's no antibodies built to anything along those lines too. So occasionally I'll see where they actually will give a little bit of T3, but very, very rarely, almost always. And if you say we give you a T4, and this is what I see on a common basis, give you T4, the TSH goes back in a normal range, and you tell the doctor, I still don't feel good, so give you some more T4. Well, you got plenty in there, it's just not working. And the antibodies are completely left alone. So what do? From a functional medicine standpoint, the very first thing we do, what would you all do if y'all were a doctor? Let's say you're already on thyroid medication.
Do a liver cleanse?
Well, not necessarily a cleanse, but yeah, you look at the liver. What's the function of the liver? Why? 60 to 70% of the T3 is coming from the liver. Next thing is going to be the gut. Is the gut healthy? Are you processing your foods? Are you doing all the things you're supposed to do? Do you have leaky gut? And then the next thing you will always get in my office when we'll do these antibodies to check and see, do you have any autoimmune problems? And here's the problem with the autoimmune. If you're getting attacked to these things and it continues to destroy them, eventually the thyroid would just shut down completely because it wipes them out. And you've got to stop that process. If you find out, for example, that wheat is causing this antibody reaction, and you take the wheat out of the diet, then your thyroid is going to go back to normal because it's not being destroyed. The antigen is not, antibody complex is not there. We see this on a regular basis. So we're going to do food allergy testing. I didn't get into adrenals today. Adrenals will also cause problems with high cortisol levels and things like that. I'm going to do another tape on adrenals here in the near future so we can tie all this together. Of course, the hormone testing, because estrogen and testosterone will suppress these things. They will go in and bind on some of these receptor sites like we talked about earlier and cause problems. And of course, blood work and intestinal testing and that type of thing. So as you can see here, this is not a simple thing. So when we come in and we start testing all these different things, it's a lot more complex. Now, if you need thyroid medication, we do that in the New Mexico office. But we almost always can reduce the medication to minimal. And if you already have the enzymes